Jews. And then you'll understand maybe why Hitler felt the way he did. First, their synagogues or churches should be set on fire and burned. And this ought to be done in the honor of God and Christianity, in order that God may see that we are Christians. Thirdly, they should be deprived of their prayer books and the Talmud, in which is idolatry, lies, and cursings, and blasphemy. Fourthly, their rabbis must be forbidden under the threat of death to teach their word. Fifthly, their passports and traveling privilege should be absolutely forbidden as Jews. Then he goes on down and he says, if, however, we are afraid that they might harm us personally, or our wives, or our children, or our servants, or our cattle, let us expulse them, just as France and Spain. And here's the last thing he says. To sum up, dear princes and notables who have Jews in your domains who are in your cabinet or working for you, if this advice of mine does not suit you, then find a better one, so that you and we may all be free from this inseparable Jewish burden, the Jews. Now, you hear that and you said, man, this guy has a real problem with the Jews. You know who wrote that? Martin Luther, the great reformer. The reason I shared that story was that was the kind of person that inspired Hitler. And so when we look at the world today and we start talking about the Antichrist, we have a little picture of how that could happen, but how it's going to happen on a grander scale. And he's going to use the government. He's going to use religion. He's going to use the economy. He's going to use everything at his disposal to rule this world. So let's go back to the Bible. This is kind of where we started in Daniel chapter 7. Remember, we talked about those 4 kingdoms, and now Daniel chapter 7, we come back and we pick it up, and we remember about those 10 horns. Here it is. This is where it all starts. This is the last 7 years. This is where the Antichrist comes on the scene. In Daniel 7, in fact, that song that we just sung about Ancient of Days, some of you probably have wondered, well, what is that? But you just need to read Daniel chapter 7, look at verse 10. You'll find the answer to that. But anyway, look at verse 7. While I was watching in the night visions, the 4th beast appeared, frightening and dreadful and incredibly strong with large iron teeth. And we talked about that being, the Roman Empire. It devoured and crushed, and it trampled with its feet whatever was left. Now here it comes. It was different from the beast before it. They had 10 horns. While I was considering the horns, and suddenly another horn, a little one, came up among them, and 3 of the first horns were uprooted. There were 10 horns. Remember, we talked about that, 10 nations or 10 kingdoms. Out of those 10, there's going to be 3, and then there's going to be a little one. He's going to come forth and somehow devour 3 of those kingdoms. There were eyes in this horn like a man, and it had a mouth that spoke arrogantly. Go down to verse 23 and verse 24. This is what he said. The 4th beast will be a 4th kingdom on the earth, different from all the other kingdoms. It will devour the whole earth, trample it down, and crush it. The 10 horns are 10 kings who will rise from the kingdom. Now here's how we know it's different. Another, different from the previous one, that is the Roman Empire, will rise after them and subdue 3 kings. After the rapture, the Bible says there's going to be this guy that's going to come to the scene. There's going to be a 10-nation confederacy, and I believe it's going to come out of the revived Roman Empire. Today, as we shared, there are at least 27 nations in the European Union. I believe it's going to be out of that. I believe the Antichrist will come out of the European nations. And the Bible's saying here he's going to be different than all the rest. He's going to come to power. He's going to defeat 3 of the kingdoms. Somehow he's going to be able to do that. He's going to present himself as the Messiah. He's going to be able to present himself as a strong military leader. He's going to be enormously, effectively, politically. He's going to be able to speak with such charisma that the whole world will pay attention to him. Now, let me tell you the first thing that he does. Now, remember, the church is out of here. Chaos. Think about the nation of Israel. They probably no longer have America at their side. they're desperate too. Because now, those forces that have been trying to destroy Israel, now they have a great opening. But what if somebody from the European Union or the old revived Roman Empire steps up and says, I've got an answer to the problem in the Middle East. And he's able to lead them to a peace treaty between the Palestinians and Israel. You think that would get the world's attention? I think it will. We've been sharing that, ever since I can remember, every president in America has tried to somehow carve out a Middle East peace plan. And it's been incredible as I've been studying for this. It seems like about every 10 years people say that some Antichrist comes on the scene. I was reading this last week, and I don't know where these people get this stuff. Did you know there were people that thought that John F. Kennedy was the Antichrist? Really, they did. And they really thought that when he was lying in state that he was going to be resurrected, and we'll see why they believe that in just a moment. But some people thought it was John F. Kennedy because he was so smooth politically and just seemed to have that charisma about him. And then, a few years ago, some people thought it was Saddam Hussein. Well, we know it couldn't be him. But, people thought that it was him because of where he was at in Iraq and Babylon. And we talked about that on Wednesday night a few weeks ago, how that's going to play a role in the end times. But, right now, and at this church, we don't get into this thing in politics. We don't talk about that at church at Argyle. What we do believe is that all of us need to be exemplary citizens and that we need to be submissive to our government. We need to pray. But you've heard it, and I've heard it on TV and talk radio. Now we've got a president who is very, very effective in the way he communicates and seems to have this charisma about him. Today there are some people saying he's either the Messiah or he's the Antichrist. Really? Well, I guess I wouldn't get points, in PR work because he's neither, okay? He's neither. And so when you look at the Bible and you look at what's happening, what I do believe, I think President Obama probably will have the greatest shot of any president in the United States of America to try to formulate some kind of peace treaty in the Middle East. I will not be surprised by that. I think it's possible that he will lay the foundation. It's possible that they even will have a temporary treaty. The point that I'm trying to make is this. Folks, we are getting closer and closer and closer to the midnight hour. Because that's the first thing that happens when the Antichrist comes on the scene. There's a peace treaty between Israel and the Palestinians, something that nobody's been able to do in history. They've been fighting for 5,000 years. Now, let me tell you what's happening before that happens. The rapture of the church takes place. And this is kind of deep theologically, but I'm trying to explain this so that we all understand how all this happens. Before mankind was ever created, the Bible teaches that there was a war in heaven. There was a time when there was an archangel that was before God who was like second in command. And one day he said, I want to have everything that God has. And if you're here today and you've ever wondered where does Satan come from, he was an angel at one time. He was a created angel. He was one of the top angels in heaven. But he decided he wanted God's throne. And God said, you can't have it. And he cast Satan out of this inner sanctum that he used to enjoy. But ever since that day, and it's so hard to explain this, but ever since that day, there's been war that we talked about in Ephesians 6. And somehow Satan to this day still has the ability to enter heaven and kind of make accusations against you and me the way he made accusations against Job. Folks, this is that spiritual stuff that we can't see, and it's so dark and it's so powerful that if we saw it, we probably couldn't sleep at night. But there's these forces of evil, and they go and they approach the throne of God. They don't get to the very throne of God, but they get to this area where they're able to just have this conversation back and forth. Well, in Revelation chapter 12, something happens because there's a second war in heaven. And this is where it really gets very unique, because now Satan and all of his angels are cast out forever. And when they're cast out of heaven forever in Revelation chapter 12, all of a sudden Satan and all of his angels come to this earth. And you can see the timing in this, because it happens at the same time that the church is raptured. I've tried to imagine this. Okay.